Welcome everybody to another solo video here with Ben. Once again, today I'm going to discuss about a topic that I researched for some time and is also related to a personal experience of mine. What I'm going to talk about orphanages, and there have been different psychological theories of attachment developed on studies that were done on Romanian children. And because Romanian orphanages were actually the place where um, that have been the most catastrophic um, the most catastrophic events for children up to that point. And are places where overcrowded rooms were filled, buildings in this case filled with orphans, that these orphans were like in really left to really tedious conditions, where out of control kids were those with adult tranquilizers, um, done through unsterilized needles, and while many that received transfusions of blood fell to other illnesses such as HIV, hepatitis B, and these kind of health issues ravaged through Romanian orphanages. So I'm going to talk about that. It's a little bit tough of a topic. I want to forewarn you, but is something that is really important to me. Is part of my story, and I wanted to share with you. But before we jump in, just try to make sure to maybe consider subscribing or sharing uh, what you see here, our content. And who knows, if you have a similar experience maybe or not, leave a comment below. Who knows? This might be helpful, or maybe you might learn something that you did not know before. So we go back to Romania, and it was 1989, and this was when the public execution through a firing squad of Romania's last communist dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu. Ceausescu was a dictator that ruled for 24 years in Romania, and in 1990, the outside world discovered a network of child gulags, literally, like sort of like concentration camps at this point, where there was an estimated 170,000 abandoned infants, children, and teens that were being raised. And believing that a larger population of children would actually increase the economic productivity of Romania, increase the economy of the country. And Ceausescu actually abolished contraception and abortion, and imposed tax penalties on couples that were childless. And he celebrated heroine mothers. Heroine mothers were women who had like 10 children and up. So they were really like, it was a big deal back then to have 10 kids. And all the parents, though, who could not handle another child, upon their arrival, they would call it's going to be Ceausescu's child. And as in saying, let him raise it. So in order to house a generation of these unaffordable children, Ceausescu ordered the construction of the conversion of hundreds of structures and create orphanages. And the terrifying thing is that there were signs that displayed the slogan saying, the state can take better care of your child than you can. Now, if you look from a communist dictator perspective, you can see why communist never works. No matter how many times you try in history, you always ends up in bloodshed, in dictatorship, and in huge inequality. There is no true equality or noble goal in that. Millions have perished under communism. And at age 3, children were sorted, and future workers would get clothes, shoes, resources, food, and some schooling in children's homes. However, deficient children in this case are those that even had a small physical impairment like cross eyes or um, children that have if a limp or like speech impairments, they were thought to be deficient. And according to the Soviet science of defectology, these were viewed as serious disabilities. So these kids, and most of them were deemed incurable. Now look at that. They just give them for a lost cause. And these actually were classified as unsalvageable. So all these kids were left in other orphanages in unspeakable conditions, and they were like left over for like in these places where they will put these kids in small cages and feed them, deprived from any human contact or affection. So after the Romanian Revolution, what happened? The world was opened up to Romania, and scientists from all over the world went over to Romania and found unspeakable conditions where these thin skeletal kids were splashing in feces, and they, just like the liberation of Auschwitz 45 years prior to that, many scholars and people that found out the truth were haunted throughout their whole life. And there is here accounts of a pediatrician that walked through to see what happened here. And pediatric teams were summoned to Romania by the new government, and they say, we walk into a pitch black, freezing cold building and discover there are youngsters lurking about. They're tiny but older, something weird like trolls, filthy, stinking. They're chanting in a drone-like way, gibberish. We open a door and find a population of cretins. Now it's known as congenital iodine deficiency syndrome. Untreated hypothyroidism stunts growth and brain development. I don't know how old they were. 3 feet tall, could have been in their 20s. In other rooms, we see teenagers the size of 6 and 7-year-olds with no secondary sexual characteristics. There were children with underlying genetic disorders lying in cages. You start almost to disassociate. So, Romanian orphans were just like considered, it was for psychologists, that were the first time that they saw that. They were devastated by what they saw. And the same as World War II orphans, they were isolated for a longer period of times. There was this early psychologists thought that kids only needed nourishment, they needed clothing, water, and a house. But there was something deeper. Kids need much more than that at that point, children. And the idea that kids just needed material goods was a little bit overrated at that point, because kids needed an attachment figure, a parent or a caregiver that could help them out survive, actually. So neuroscientists saw as the attachment theory was seen as a soft science. There was not much importance given to it. And so what happened is that through actually the first studies were the University of Minnesota, where they collected all the information and they found out some motor stereotypes among these abandoned children in these large orphanages. And they found kids that were rocking, banging their heads, squawking, and most of them were really like also in swaying, twirling, and self-mutilating. Like these kids had really different behaviors that kids with normal families did not have. And after the decades after the fall of Ceausescu, the Romanian government welcomed Western child development experts to study the situation. And then the psychologists, the scholars, found out that there are sensitive periods in neural development after which the brain of a deprived child cannot make full use of the mental, emotional, and physical stimulation later offered. And then they were trying to answer these questions. Can the effect of maternal deprivation or caregiver absence be documented with modern neuroimaging techniques? And then if an institutionalized child, if transferred to a family setting, can recoup the underdevelopment. And so in 2000, they launched a study. And they were one of the first studies in human development that was called the Bucharest Early Intervention Project. And it will become the first ever randomized control trial to measure the impact of early institutionalization on brain and behavioral development, and to examine high quality foster care as an alternative. So by design, they had 136 children, ages from 6 months to 3.5 years. And they separated two groups of kids. 68 children would continue being institutionalized, while the rest of the other 68 children were actually sent in foster care, so with family. And the findings, what they measured was that these kids, they were in a strange. If you had, for example, kids that had a maternal or paternal figure, and the parent would leave the room, you will see symptoms of these kids that start becoming anxious and looking around and being missing that parent. While with the other kids, that was not the case. So without knowing which kids were institutionalized or in a foster care environment, scholars were able to recognize with 100% certainty which of the kids was the kid in an orphanage or versus the guy that had a foster care or family setting. So that was one of the things that was astounding. So they were able to identify the behavior. And then what they were able to find some data collected, and children were reassessed for playroom situations, and the kids that were in the orphanage were unable to recognize facial expression, to demonstrate feelings, also to show intelligence in their case, or even to show basic empathy for other children while playing together. They were unable to do so. They had developmental issues at that point. So that was one of the greatest difference. And then say here, one thing that they found out, the study helped Romania actually to close the orphanages and develop a foster care system in which the ages for the children, that if you put up a child in an orphanage from age 2 years, or actually was 3.5 years or younger, they will be very detrimental for their development. Instead, if you send them to foster care, they will be recuperable at that point. So it will be much better. And then, so what do we say here? So the benefits for children who achieved secure attachments accrued as time went on. At age 4.5, they had significantly lower rates of depression and anxiety and fewer callous unemotional traits. Limited empathy, lack of guilt, shallow affect than their peers still in institutions. About 40% of teenagers in the studies who've been in orphanages, in fact, were eventually diagnosed with a major psychiatric condition. Their growth was stunted, their motor skills and language development stalled. MRI studies revealed that the brain volume of the still institutionalized children was below that of never institutionalized, and the EEG showed profoundly less brain activity. And according to the evolutionary theory, a baby, the purpose of a baby is to show attachment for a small number of people, and unattached children instead. So when you have an attachment figure and you're secure, you're less anxious. So you grow in a stable environment. Instead, unattached children, that are the ones in institutions, they're always anxious. They see a threat everywhere, and they're unable to, their brain studies show that they're flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And the amygdala, that is the main part of the brain that deals with fear and emotion, works overtime for these institutionalized children. So that's really a negative thing. And one common trait that was shown in orphanages all over the world in different countries, such as England and Greece, for example, they showed that institutionalized children had a lower IQ. They had large developmental gaps in intelligence development compared to children living in a normal family setting or even in foster care. So that's something that is crazy. So what happened when a child is loved, has a normal upbringing, for example? When a baby is showered with loving attention, neural pathways thrive in the brain. The pathways multiply, intersect, and loop through remote regions of the brain. But in the brain of a neglected baby, a baby lying alone and unwanted every week, every year, fewer connections get built. The baby's wet diaper isn't changed, the baby's smiles aren't answered, the baby falls silent, the door is closing, but as liberal light shines around the frame. And there, it's incredible because these kids, as we said before, they tend to activate the amygdala. There is this part of the brain that is located deep within the temporal lobes of the brain on each side, plays a crucial role in processing emotions, particularly those related to fear and aggression and pleasure. And among the functioning of the amygdala, we can process emotion properly, developmentally. We grow up in stages, and amygdala processes fear response, learning and memory, social and emotional behavior, and reward processes. So if we live in a setting where we are continuously flooded and stressed because kids are not have attachments to any parents, they grow in that kind of environment, the volume of the amygdala increases because people that experiences childhood trauma, for example, have a larger amygdala volume compared to those who have not, because this heightens the sensitivity of the threat or an adaptive response to stressful environments. And then he says here, there is a heightened response to activities and stimuli like hyperactivity, because there is high emotional reactions. So that everything is seen as high emotionality. You're very sensitive to that. And then there is altered connectivity between the amygdala and other brain regions. So as I said before, there's that lack of stability in neural connections in the brain. And once again here, the last part of this video, it's I want to talk about my experience. So when I was 4 years old, my parents divorced. My mother left home for another man, and my sister and I were sent to an orphanage. This was over 36 years ago in southern Italy. So social services decided that nobody could take care of us in the family. Nobody stepped up. And my sister and I ended up in an orphanage growing up with nuns. We were with around 30 other kids, more or less, 25, 30, everybody coming from similar conditions where children victims of abuse and other unstable conditions. And you have to imagine at the age of 4, when I went there, my sister was 7. I exchanged my sister as a mother figure almost to that point. She was the only anchor, the only attachment that I had. And I grew up there until the age of 14. So pretty much all my early childhood and developmental years I spent in the orphanage. We attended public schools, but it wasn't easy because we were people would look at us uh, with piety, and they would look at us, looking at us and thinking of us, every adult thinking, oh, look at these poor children. My whole life it was like that. And that was frustrating, and I didn't even know how to react to that. um, we would see other kids with their parents the entire time, and there was a tough pill to swallow because on a daily basis you will get that. But at the same time, we were being more callous. We were more less emotional. So we developed we were more harsh. We grew up in that harsh condition, and we lacked so many hugs, so much physical contact is another important thing that you want to have with children. When you tell them that you love them, when you tell them that you're with them. And I grew up with this anxiety and this fear always of missing something, missing someone. I did not have a mother figure, and that was the toughest thing. So among other things, among the different issues, we're always there waiting for somebody to come and visit us, and always anxious, always looking behind uh, our back. And then the environment of the orphanage was not the happiest one. You were dealing with other kids, and it was like, how can I say, a small jungle. You have to assert yourself in with other children. Most of them were not really stable. So you have to try to grow up and face challenges, small challenges, among the overall overarching point of the difficulty of growing without parents. And I developed a sense of, I never felt home anywhere. Never. Was never the case. Still today. I still have that difficulty. And attachment and bonding was never there. Was terrible. Had a hard time establishing good relationships because I was always fearful of abandonment, because it looks like the lessons that I learned with my parents when they put us there, it was like I can never trust anybody else because my parents betrayed my trust. The people that were supposed to be there for me, they were not there, and they abandoned us to that extent. And you found myself having troubles developing behavior problems when I was little. Emotionality, ups and downs, extremes, highs, lower lows. Having a negative sense of living, being negative, like looking at a situation, and instead of looking all the positive aspects of something, I would still be critical. Still today, I still am. However, I catch myself in trying to better myself and say, well, don't think like I'm self-aware, and I say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to think like that. I want to see the bright side of it. What I experienced definitely developmental delays, in the sense that each stage of my growth has been delayed. So even if I was older, my mental development was still lower like in age, in years, because I always had the tendency to hang out with people that were kids that were younger than I was. So to that extent, I can put that in line. And when you do 2 plus 2, you realize that uh, probably that was one of the causes. Uh, thank God, I always had a good physical health and had suffered some social isolation in my adult life, but tried to deal with those issues in one step at a time, and try to think positive. Sometimes I still think too much about the past, about the trauma and the loss, and um, the fact of transitioning to adulthood has been difficult because I've seen uh, little to no hope for a better future. However, after I told you all these things, I want to tell you also that throughout all this adversity, I had a tremendous work ethic, and I never strayed from the path. Even among, I should have been a statistic. I should have been maybe dead long time ago, or ended up overdosed or drunk somewhere else. But I never touched, I never got drunk, and I never tried any drugs. My only thing is that I try to put myself through exercise, physical exercise, martial arts were the things that put me through and that drove me away from the negative thoughts, the negative energy, the negative people. And I try to every day, still today, it's a challenge, and it looks like sometimes we cannot escape from our past. And I acknowledge that we have a choice. We have a choice to make. Like, we cannot drive forward by looking at the rear view mirror, like some other speakers have said in the past. Um, and it's not just a fancy thing to say, but it is true. So, to some extent, we need to look forward and move forward and be positive. And I'm telling you the story because maybe you're going through a tough patch in your life, and it's not by any means a competition of telling people or advertise my situation, because I've always been private for this, but obviously now it's out there. And but maybe my story can help you out if you're going through a difficult time, and give you hope that there is a possibility to improve your life, and that if you choose, no matter what situation you're into, no matter how hard it is, you can find yourself and turn the tide and choose to move in a different path. um, and most of the time I find myself like, I felt that for the most part of my life other people made decisions for me, and they were all the wrong decisions that were made for us, for me and for myself and my sister. But once I reach adulthood, I still carry myself that mentality that there is somebody pulling the strings from up there that is making me do all these mistakes, and I would curse myself and God every day. But I did not understand. I was not mature enough to understand that there was something that I could do, and I had to change my point of view. I had to change my mentality, my mindset in moving forward and do things in a different way. How you do that? Well, by start being positive, by getting up, finding something that I want to excel at, by working, by keeping busy, by reading, by exercising to the point where I almost throw up. That's one thing you could say that is physical punishment, but that's one thing that pushed me really through the hard times when I had a tough challenge on my way. Not saying that you have to do any of those things, but you can find your own ways to see what is right for you to overcome challenges, and know that that's not the end. that a mistake is not fatal, and that the past is not there to haunt you, and maybe you can find the lesson from it. Um, Through no fault of my own, I could blame the world for it and blame my situation to my past and to my years at the orphanage or my parents. But would I be the same person I am today if were not for my past, for my experience? Would I be resilient as I am today? Because I will tell you, I will not. And maybe sometimes bad things happen to good people at the same time. And what do? We live. We live on. We grow stronger from it. We learn. We try to get the lesson from it, even if you don't deserve it. Sometimes it happens. Shit happens, and what are you gonna do? You gonna cry out for the rest of your life? Uh, Keep on blaming the world? No, that's not. I don't think that's the right way. That's not the philosophy that I would like to follow. Therefore, you just keep on living and keep on moving. Think positive. Beautiful things happened to me afterwards. I had 2 children, and I cannot imagine my life without them. And I could never think or dream about putting my kids in a tough situation like my parents did with me. I could never imagine that. I will never do that. And I love them with all my heart. And I am for them the parent that I never had, because my goal is to be there for them and give them all the love and all the opportunities that I did not have, with good measure, of course. I don't want to raise spoiled brats. And well, I hope you can find some solace in this video. If you if you want, you can get the good or the bad, throw out the bad, get the useful, and let me know in the comments if you want to share part of your story. I'll read them, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye.